The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, episode 106.
Oi! Don't be scared. All of this is new to you and new can be scary. When people need help, I never refuse. There's this moment when you're sure you're about to die, and then you're born. I know exactly who I am. I'm the Doctor. Ta-da! Ooh. Should be fine.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. Today we're discussing the New Year's special for Season 11, the conclusion to Season 11, called Resolution. Joining me today is Jimmy Akin. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And we don't have Father Corey today because, as you can imagine, Christmas might be a bit of a busy time for priests. And for Catholics, it's still Christmas all the way through Sunday, which will be the Feast of Epiphany. And,
actually, longer than that.
You know, the Christmas season goes all the way through the end of January to Candlemas. But Father Corey was very busy over Christmas, of course, and then took a much-deserved vacation, and he'd hoped to join us, but it just didn't work out. So he'll be back.
Visiting family, which is really cool.
Yes, and very important. Much more important than being on a podcast with us, as much as we miss him. But he'll be back with us on our next episode, which is coming up next week. And that brings me to my next point, which is you're getting this on a Wednesday. If everything goes well this afternoon and I edit everything together quickly and get it out the door, you'll receiving this, or this is going out on a Wednesday. You might receive it Thursday morning or something before work. But our schedule is changing a little bit. You're used to getting Secrets of Doctor Who on Mondays and Secrets of Star Trek, if you subscribe to that, and which I hope you do, on Wednesdays. With the end of Series 11 or Season 11, depending on where you are, of Doctor Who and the incipient beginning of Star Trek Discovery, we're shifting things around, and so Secrets of Star Trek will be on Monday's release, and Secrets of Doctor Who we're going to start releasing on Wednesdays, and then we'll do that until they change the schedules on us again and everything gets all messed up. But for the short term, which leads me to say, if you are not yet subscribed to Secrets of Star Trek, and you probably like Star Trek if you like Doctor Who, it's not certain, but you probably do. And you should definitely subscribe because we're having a blast with that. And with a new season of Star Trek Discovery coming along, we're going to be talking about that. And you don't want to miss it. This year, we're going to be able to talk about it as each episode drops and have, just like we do with Secrets of Doctor Who. It's a lot of fun. And then when the seasons of Star Trek Discovery is over, we'll talk about the new Picard series. We'll talk about Lower Decks. There's so much new Star Trek coming.
Axanar,
right. We're going to talk about fan productions. And of course, we're talking about the 50 years of Star Trek that we already have. So please subscribe to that at sqpn.com/Star Trek. So all the preliminaries passed. We now come to Resolution. And so as the show begins, we have, just like the season began, the last episode begins with no opening credits. Just straight cold open, boom, right into the episode, and no Doctor Who logo until the closing credits.
Yeah, in fact, you wouldn't know from what you see on screen that this thing is even called Resolution because we don't get a title card up at the front of the show. Yeah. This was, incidentally, this is the first New Year's special we've had for Doctor Who. In recent years, we've had Christmas specials ever since the revival in 2005.
Yep. Except for 2010.
Yeah, but there's been some up or down quality in those. Yep. We recently reviewed A Christmas Carol, which for my money is the very best of the Christmas specials. Yes. I really like that one, even though I'm not a fan of the source material, Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. But they thought, okay, we're kind of tapped out on Christmas. We don't really have a lot of good Christmassy ideas from here at this point, so let's shift to New Year's Day. And I think that was reasonable, but in hindsight, I think they didn't serve themselves well by shifting to New Year's, because the overnight ratings for this were significantly down.
Yeah.
From any of the Christmas specials they've done. The lowest of the Christmas specials were all getting like more than 7 million viewers, and this one got 5.15 million viewers. And we still have to wait for the 7-day, delayed viewing figures to come in. But it looks like they and some of the other Christmas specials got like 11, 12 million. Mm-hmm. And so it looks like they kind of didn't get the viewing figures that they were expecting. Doctor Who Christmas special was kind of a tradition. People were at home with their family watching TV on Christmas in a way maybe they aren't on New Year's. And I think this could have worked as a Christmas special. There's even a moment where you have a family that, because of stuff happening in the plot, is denied access to the internet and television, and it's like, what, we're going to have a conversation, and they talk about how everything is closed on New Year's and there's nothing to do. And I don't know if that's really true in England. It's not here. The stores here in America are frequently open on New Year's, the restaurants and things like that. But that totally would have worked on Christmas. So they could have just changed a line of dialogue, and it would have been a Christmas episode, and they would have got all those extra viewers.
There was no real New Year's content. There was an opening little line from the Doctor about how they had visited 20 New Year's Eve celebrations in a row, and we'll talk about the details of that. But that could have been 20 Christmas Eves in a row. You know what I mean? It didn't have to be New Year's. There was nothing specifically New Year's about this episode. So why not just put it, release it on Christmas? I didn't understand that. I didn't if there was a New Year's kind of plot to this, that might be worthwhile, but I didn't. I mean, even the name, I didn't understand the name. Why Resolution? What about this episode says resolution? What was resolved?
Well, the Doctor has a line at one point about, this is my resolution. And that's the only connection. But it's like, okay, if you're out of Christmas ideas, it's not like you got a bunch of really, Sockdolage or New Year's ideas that you're springing on us. So it could have been any win. They would have had to change one other line of dialogue, though. One of the New Year's that they mention visiting, it's Yaz's favorite, discovering a dwarf planet with Giuseppe Piazzi in 1801. Well, okay, they would have had to change that line of dialogue because in real life, Father Giuseppe Piazzi, who was a priest and a monk, did discover the Dwarf Planet series on January 1st, 1801, which is really cool to have that in there. Yeah. But they would have had to change that line of dialogue if they made this a Christmas special also.
Right. And just like being on the Sydney Harbour Bridge in 2000 on the Millennium, etc. Yeah. But right. So, but there was no reason to make this a New Year's thing. In fact, it wasn't really a New Year's episode at all. I mean, it was just an episode. All right. So the one thing I want to point out is there has been Doctor Who on New Year's recently, and that was in 2010. It was the second part of the Christmas special, End of Time, which was the 10th Doctor, David Tennant's regeneration, which we've talked about previously. So a couple other notable aspects of the episode as a whole. We assume you've watched it. If you haven't watched it, you should watch it before you get spoiled.
Spoilers, sweetie.
It's exactly. The Daleks are the first of the classic Doctor enemies to return, of the old or new era, the Moffat or Davies time or previously. So they have returned, and as we had suspected, that there is this contractual obligation to put the Daleks once a season in Doctor Who with the estate of the guy,
Terry
Nation, which is it's a very interesting concept. This idea that the Daleks are these characters or creatures are separately copyrighted from the show. It's just fascinating to me that it this way. I mean, it'd be like if the Klingons were copyrighted by somebody other than Gene Roddenberry's estate or something like that. It's very interesting. Anyway,
I want to, and apropos of now that we mentioned this is a Dalek episode, I want to really give them props for what they did with it, because they gave us something new with Daleks. We have not seen this before. They've got a Dalek that's out of its shell, that's defending on its own or operating on its own, and that is still a credible threat.
Yes.
And we have not seen that before. They've done other things with individual Daleks, because the problem with these days with Daleks is you tend to either go big and you've got a bazillion Daleks posing some kind of universal threat, and that's been done to death.
Right.
We've looked at the beginning of the Daleks. That's been done. We've looked at the Daleks in their own environment on Skaro. That was the very first thing we did. And we've seen mutant versions of Daleks that either kind of sort of went good or that got crossbred with humanity. And it's like, what is there left to do? And I've been thinking in anticipation of this episode, what are Chris Chibnall really likes doing new stuff that hasn't been done before. What is there to do with the Daleks? And they found something. And so I really want to give them props for that. This episode felt like a new scary Dalek thing that we had not seen before. And that's really great.
Right. They are scary and dangerous apart from the armored shell. And that makes it a very interesting, unlike, say, the first season of New Who, where we had the episode Dalek, where we get to see the squid-like creature inside at the very end, but it seems uninteresting, uninteresting, unthreatening is what the word I meant.
Yeah.
Once the shell is open, but this one is scary. One other thing I want to just mention before we get into talking about the episode itself is that it was directed by Wayne Yip, which unless you are a Doctor Who aficionado, you might not recognize, but he has directed many episodes when Stephen Moffat was running the series, but hasn't been back. In fact, there have been no veteran directors in this season. They were all new. So it was interesting to see what the differences might be with a new director. So, a returning director. So that was interesting as well. So let's get into talking about the episode itself. It opens with some narration. Now, I didn't see in the credits who was doing the narration. Was that the actor who plays Ryan's dad? And I'm going to mangle his name, Daniel Adegboyega.
I don't know. To tell you the truth, I listened to the narration at the beginning, but I didn't interpret it as being diegetic as coming from any character in the story. So I wasn't really looking for that.
Well, I didn't think it was either, but I couldn't recognize, and I didn't, very often they start for some reason they start the Christmas or now New Year specials with narration. It's a very common thing that they do, apparently.
And sometimes they do pull back and reveal who was narrating later. Right. Like originally, The End of Time, that was narrated by Timothy Dalton.
Yes.
And we recognize Timothy Dalton's voice, but then we don't know until much later, he's also playing Rassilon.
Right, exactly. And then there have been others where we've had opening narration. But so I don't know. I kind of, it sounded like a little bit like him when we finally see him. So I don't know. But so we have this opening narration where it talks about how many centuries ago, and we find out later it's about 1,000 years ago, a creature...
1200, the 9th century.
The 9th century, right. A creature, we don't tell what, attacks the Earth, and 3 tribes of warring people unite to fight against it and are nearly wiped out before they succeed in killing it, where they cut into 3 pieces, and the 3 surviving warriors decide to take it to the ends of the earth to separate it so that it would never come back or something. And so we get this image of these 3 warriors, and there's a black man, a woman, a Caucasian woman, and a Caucasian man. And the black man, he goes to Anuda Atoll in the South Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
The woman goes to Siberia, and the other guy doesn't get very far. He gets cut down in Yorkshire, England, by an ambush. But I'm looking at the implausibility of so much of this opening sequence.
Yeah, so it's not like they didn't. I mean, there were situations. Well, okay, so let's start with the big obvious implausibility. 9th century, Iron Age people defeating a Dalek.
Yes.
And now, okay, we've had inconsistent portrayals of how defeatable the Daleks are over the course of the series. I mean, in their very first appearance, back during the William Hartnell era, they spin them around and get them confused and take them out of their shell and stuff like that. They're not much of a threat. As late as the 7th Doctor, Sylvester McCoy's era, we have Ace, his companion, defeating a Dalek with a baseball bat.
Right.
So we've seen weak Daleks, but in the new series, they've portrayed them as so dangerous that, like in the episode you mentioned from 2005, Dalek, one Dalek can kill everyone on the planet in the 21st century.
Right.
And so it's just very implausible that people in the 9th century would be able to do this. That's the biggest implausibility here. But then we have, this unlikely trio of warriors who are the chiefs of the people who defeated it. And it's not impossible historically. I mean, there were people from of African heritage who ended up in England early on. I mean, as early as Roman times. There were women who sometimes fought in battle in emergency situations. They typically, though, were not warrior chieftains, although there were exceptions, like Boudica of the Iceni tribe. That was not in the 9th century. That was, like in the 1st century. By the 9th century, you didn't have female warrior chieftains in England. So that's just very implausible. But the bigger problem here for me is that this just comes across as a flaw in the episode, because the show has established for itself in recent series, but especially in this series, a kind of PC narrative, politically correct narrative that is distracting. And I don't like having to think in these terms. I just want to be able to enjoy the story. But when they keep throwing this material at us, that's implausible and that seems to be in the service of a politically correct narrative, it is just a distraction from the story. They've got this PC ongoing sequence of things, a PC narrative that the show, I think, needs to break with. They need to change it up. They need to get away from this. And this particular trio of warriors just falls right into the standard modern PC trio, where you have a white guy accompanied by a woman, either white or not white, and then a guy who is not white, might be Asian, might be black, but you've got this standard set of characters that are a trope, that are deliberately racially and genderly mixed in order to say to the audience, we're being inclusive, we're being politically correct here. And It's just a distraction from the story if it doesn't fit the historical era. It doesn't in this case.
They exactly match the companions.
Mm-hmm.
You have a white guy, a black guy, and a woman.
Yeah,
it's distracting in that it just doesn't. It feels like it feels like tokenizing people, and it's a little dehumanizing in a sense. As these people were chosen not because the story demands a certain person.
Or because it even makes sense in context of the story.
But because we had
just to tick those boxes.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, it is distracting because it doesn't need to be that way. Just pick the best actor for the job and be done with it. And whatever they look like, just put them on the screen. And because they're not even that important, these particular characters, they don't have lines. They disappear rapidly in the story and move on. And it just feels, yeah, you're right. It does feel like we just have this checkbox that we have to, this checklist we have to go through when we're hiring people for the show.
And unfortunately, the PC narrative continues a little further in the show. When we meet the 21st century archaeologists, there's a man and a woman, and they're kind of awkwardly at the beginning of a relationship. And I actually think they handle this this discussion between the two of them, because it's New Year's Day. Apparently they've kissed, and the guy is trying to find out, was that kiss more than just a friendly New Year's colleague kiss?
Right.
And he kind of broaches that subject, and it's awkward, as it would be in real life. And the female archaeologist indicates, well, didn't you think it was a little more kissy than just a New Year's colleague kiss?
That was fun.
And yeah, and it was great. And I love that. I'm like cheering for these characters. They're establishing a romantic relationship. It's awesome. And then as the story unfolds, it turns out the guy is passive in the relationship and clueless. He's like bringing up, maybe we should go out for a drink now when they're in the middle of an emergency. And it's the woman who's in charge of the relationship and is the smart one. And that just falls into a different politically correct trope.
I would say that one is for me a little bit less of a politically correct trope, only because
I would agree.
Nerdy guys, and he comes across as nerdy guy, tend to be insecure in relationships and tend to, at least at the beginning, I think the woman tends to have to be in the driver's seat in the determining things. Well, I mean, in my experience with my wife, it was that way. So well, I kind of identify with it. Also, he's definitely got some social skill issues with women. I mean, in the middle of an emergency, he's texting her, still thinking about you. that came across as a little needy. Yeah. Although when he asked her to go for a drink, she might have said yes, were she not under the control of the Dalek at that point. Yeah. So which we didn't know. Yeah. So it was more like the Dalek was in control of the relationship. So that's a little one. The thing that actually got me about the beginning, the implausibility, was the idea that someone from the 11th century would be able to travel to this tiny island in the South Pacific. Wouldn't even know that there's a tiny island in the South Pacific that I'm traveling to. How many years did that take? Right. For him to get there. And it's not even like, I mean, if you were going to say, okay, this is a guy who's come from Africa to fight the Dalek, the logical thing for him to do would be to go to a place he knows. Right. To plant the Dalek body, not some undiscovered place where he's not from and that nobody knows about in this century. Well, what about also the implausibility of hundreds of generations of the same family staying to guard these sites day and night? I mean, because they didn't know that anything was happening this day. There were people there. And who did this guy marry on this atoll? Like this tiny deserted island? Who was? Yeah. So I mean, a little bit of suspension of disbelief. I get it. It's just, it's really. Yeah, well, the Order, they haven't set it up properly okay, so like in Egyptian mythology, when Osiris is killed by Set, Osiris cuts his body up into all these pieces, and then Isis reunites them all and reanimates him as the king of the dead. Right. But what on earth would these people have thought? I mean, even if you dismember your enemy and bury him in separate places, that's usually a sign of shame. Right. And stuff, and a way of ritually degrading him after his death. They haven't done anything to establish that this thing is going to be somehow put back together, much less on its own initiative, and needs to be guarded for 12 centuries. Well, right. The idea, like, for people like from the 9th century, 10 feet buried 10 feet apart is as good as 10,000 miles. I mean, there's nothing to establish that they have this idea that this thing could come back to life and reanimate. Yeah. Perhaps that did happen in this battle, when they managed to cut it and it got itself back together again, or regrew. Then they need to show us that. Right. Exactly. And they didn't establish it, and that's part of the problem. All right. So the implausibilities of the beginning. It gets better. It gets better. Yes, that's what I was trying to say. It's interesting. So I liked how they did the whole thing where the one guy, he gets shot. They leave him where he lays, and then they kind of show they kind of fade into him being a skeleton in an archaeological dig from where he had lain, and I thought that was a really cool effect that they did there to show that. It made me wonder, how long would it have to be for a body that had just been left laying on the ground to end up like 30 feet underground now? And what are the mechanics of how that happens? I know that does happen, but I'd love to actually. I have never read about how does the Earth move like that.
It depends on the local weather. Because you've got to move dirt around and stuff like that, unless something falls on it.
Yeah.
Like we have lots of these bodies at Pompeii and Herculaneum because all this volcanic ash fell on them immediately.
Right.
For something like this, I mean, typically human bodies don't just get left where they fall unless it's an uninhabited area, and then they get scavenged.
Right.
The bones aren't all going to be in one place. For this to be plausible, something would have had to cover that body really quickly.
Right. So I do like this. Like you said, I like this little relationship that starts between Lynn and
Mitch.
Right. And the thing that bugs me, that there's always like lately in Doctor Who, they always have this thing where something very nice happens to very nice people, and then something very sad happens to these very nice people, and I don't like that. Now in this,
you got to show the Shire before you go to Mordor. You have to know what's under threat.
But at least in this case, I was going to say, she's not killed. You know what I mean? It's the love that they were going to that was blossoming it still has a chance. She's not been killed by the Dalek, and that was the thing I was afraid of was going to happen. So there's that. Let's see.
Fortunately, she was only tortured and possessed. Yes,
fortunately for her. So it's interesting. So they put the piece of the Dalek under an ultraviolet light, which activates it. That's the de-zombification of the Daleks happens with ultraviolet light, and the other custodians, so the pieces of the Dalek in the other places start to get active.
Teleport.
They teleport together, which it seems like a non-technological teleportation, or spatial shift, as the Doctor calls it, which is something I don't think we've ever seen before from
not
Dalek.
that I'm thinking of.
And
Nightcrawler does it, but
right. And then the other custodians unbury the pieces, which I thought was interesting. Like those pieces were not very far underground, for one thing. In fact, the one in Siberia was just under some snow. I don't know what's going on there. So that was interesting. Then we cut to the Doctor and the companions, like we said, in the TARDIS. They'd been visiting. They'd gone to 20 different New Year's Eve celebrations in a row, and we mentioned the ones that they went to, including the first one that Graham was his favorite was in
Mesopotamia.
The first New Year's Eve celebration. They invented it, apparently, and they were on their way to one at the end of the universe where it's New Year's Day every day. So apparently,
planet with a one-day orbit, I guess.
Yes, and then the Doctor gets this message, this trip alarm about something going on back on Earth, and they come back, and they show up in these sewers where the archaeological dig is going on. Meanwhile, poor Lynn is looking for the bit of artifact that has disappeared, the Dalek that has taken off. And she sees this giant squid thing on the wall. And
that was cool.
What does she do? She goes up to it and touches it. No. If I see some giant, disgusting thing on a wall in a sewer, I'm not touching it.
Yeah.
But,
okay, so she's an archaeologist, not a zoologist.
This is true. I don't think you have to be a zoologist to say, don't touch. So the poor girl, I should call it girl, she's a woman, the young woman who's an archaeologist, gets Daleked. So let's just, we talked about
a verb, Dalek.
Daleked, yes. I was actually waiting for the one where
it's like Zabu from the Guild.
Yeah, where the stalk comes out of the forehead. I thought that's what they were going to do, that kind of possession, which is they're dead at that point, of course. They didn't do that, which I'm glad of.
There's also another one from farther back in Dalek in Doctor Who history where you had the very early on in William Hartnell's era where you had these people called Dalek men, and they didn't have the thing out of the forehead, but they had like a headset that they would wear that would put them under the control of the Daleks.
Okay.
And so we have seen Daleks possessing individual humans before, but not like this. This was purely biological.
And this is brand new, which is kind of nice to see that them doing something brand new with Daleks, like we said. And it's like controlling her like a puppet. And as time goes on, its control gets stronger, which is, we've seen this in other sci-fi before, but this is new for this Daleks and Doctor Who, which is really kind of interesting. Meanwhile, and so she takes off, goes back home. Meanwhile, the next big thing that happens is
not just yet. I mean, first the TARDIS shows up,
right?
And I love the line when the Doctor comes barreling out of it, and Mitch is there, and he says, "How did you do that?" Because it's just materialized in front of him,
right?
And the Doctor says, "I'm the Doctor, and these are my best friends," and he's like, "Hi, okay." It's like, "I'm the Doctor" is an acceptable explanation for how this thing can just materialize in front of him.
Right.
For us, the audience, it is, but not for him.
It's very interesting that in this episode, there was no attempt to sort of hide the TARDIS to protect people from knowledge of it. It's just, I need to be here. This is too dangerous. And that's actually a big part of this, is the Doctor throughout this episode is much more than any other time in this season, much more scared, worried, motivated, angry, because it's, of course, because of Daleks. But you're
not dealing with a Patang anymore.
Exactly. And this is the Doctor at her most, the 13th Doctor at her most, like the other Doctors, right?
Yeah,
but most in that sense.
And I really like that. I also like the attitude that she displays towards the Dalek once she realizes what's going on. After the revived series came back, Christopher Eccleston's Doctor, as soon as he realizes he's dealing with a Dalek, he's like filled with rage and wants to kill it.
Right.
And over the David Tennant and Matt Smith and Peter Capaldi era, we have a kind of backing off from that. I mean, they still have the potential to like go into a rage, but it's not just raw nerves the way it is in the immediate aftermath of the Time War with Christopher Eccleston. And now that we get to Jodie Whittaker's Doctor, she's achieved much more balance. She does not immediately fly off the handle. Instead, her first reaction is, every time I think I'm free of them, they come back.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting how the Doctor reacts to the Daleks differently than any of the other classic villains. With Cybermen, the Doctor is kind of scared of the Daleks. Of the Cybermen, because of the potential for harm. Same thing with, he treats the Weeping Angels more like a dangerous natural phenomenon in that sense. But like you said, with Daleks, and the Master is also, is complicated. But with the Daleks, it's rage, it's anger, it's I'm remembering every awful thing that they've ever done, and it's still present to me. So it's it's probably why it's the best villain for the Doctor in that sense, because it creates the most conflict in action in an episode. So I do like that. So they move from the sewer to Graham's house.
Yeah. They're the biggest. I think the Master is a more interesting villain than the Daleks, but the Daleks are a threat, and they just scream threat.
Yeah.
In the plot in a way the Master doesn't.
Okay. So at Graham's house, after they've crushed poor Graham's rocking chair.
Oh well, before then, so they send off. The Doctor does something very sensible down in the sewers and says, okay, this Dalek is presumably scuttling around the sewers. This is not safe. Yaz will escort you to the surface, which makes sense given that she is she's a policewoman. And she says, assume proximity is a risk. And I thought she said, tell the authorities to quarantine this area. And I tried to go back and find that quote, and I wasn't able to, but I thought and that would be the logical thing to do. If there's a Dalek here, quarantine the area. And so I found it inexplicable then why Lynn and Mitch just walk off without And once they get to the surface, they just, oh, well, I guess, okay, we're going home for the day. And they split and go to their individual homes and don't tell anybody that there's a dangerous creature and we need to quarantine this area.
That was a bit interesting. I mean, we understand why Lynn would do it, but why would Mitch, who is not under the control of the Dalek, do it? That is true. That is true. So the big thing that happens, and it's something that's been building for this entire season, is
the breaking of Graham's chair.
The breaking, yes, poor Graham's rocking chair that has been neglected all season. But also Ryan's dad shows up, and it's an interesting situation. Ryan obviously is mad at him. We knew that, but we see that Graham is angry at Aaron. That's his name, Aaron, too. And once again, he's clearly ticked at him. I mean, not vocally berating him.
Yeah, I think he's definitely stern and unhappy with him.
Yeah,
I don't know. Angry is exactly how I describe it, but he's he tells him. Where's the quote I've got? Because he tells him you haven't done enough,
right?
For Ryan,
and later on he tries to when they've been left behind by the Doctor and the others, he tries to help Aaron, by giving him his things that Grace had saved, from Aaron's childhood, and try to connect with them, and tries to help him connect with Ryan, which is all good. But the reason I was saying this is I think Graham here once again proves like how great this character is. I love my revelation for this season is Graham. He's like the best, and he does such a good job here of relating to Aaron, helping Ryan. There's at one point.
I think Graham works in part for the same reason Donna Noble works. Because like you had Rose Tyler and Martha Jones, and they worked, but they were the only companions, and they were young and got to be clueless, whereas Donna Noble is more mature and is capable of having more mature reactions to things and move the plot and the personal relationships along. And that's what you see in Graham. Here, the attention has to be divided among three companions, two of whom are young people, and so they're not as mature, but Graham is the one who has the maturity to be able to move the plot and the personal relationships along.
And frankly, I think Bradley Walsh is just a great actor. Whereas the others are still young actors, Bradley Walsh has been at this so long, and he does a great job in this role. So one of the things that comes up is the Doctor says to Yaz at some point that dads are complicated, so I've heard, and that was a very interesting line. Is it a throwaway?
It's a throwaway. It's just meant to kind of tweak the audience to wonder, ooh, did she even have a dad because she's an alien? Yeah. And actually, there are some versions. Now, we had this recent mention of the Doctor having, 7 grandmothers?
Yeah.
But we also, which can even happen on Earth through remarriage and so forth.
Right.
Or polyandry. But there is actually in Doctor Who history, and this was never done on screen. It was, but as part of what was known as the Cartmel Master Plan back during the Seventh Doctor's time, it was apparently going to be established that Time Lords are not procreated the way we are, but they're like grown from genetic looms.
Okay.
And so it could be an allusion to that, or any number of other things.
Okay. I mean, the idea that, they can regenerate between sexes. So, if you're the guy, they were your granddad when before you were born, but regenerated as a grandma or whatever. I mean, that's a possibility.
That could also explain the 7 grandmas. Yeah.
So Aaron is surprised when Ryan calls Graham Gramps, which we've seen. Graham earned it by being there for Ryan this whole season, where Aaron wasn't. And I love that interaction between the three of them, between Graham and Aaron and Ryan, as this sort of revelation occurs to Aaron. There's a really nice moment there.
Yeah, by the way, I found that line from Graham. What he tells Aaron is family isn't about DNA or a name. It's about what you do, and you haven't done enough.
Right. It's
And actually, that's an oversimplification. Family kind of is about DNA, but it's also more than that. You can have adoptive relationships and so forth, like Graham has. It's not an adoption per se, but it's a legal relationship between Graham.
I've heard a phrase
Ryan.
like you can be a biological father, but that doesn't necessarily make you a dad if you're not there for them. That sort of thing. It's a different way of saying that, something similar. So we then see it's revealed to us that the Dalek is controlling Lynn like a puppet, forcing her to research the internet for the Earth's military weaknesses and the Black Archive, because TV trope number 1, all information, including the most secret and classified information, can be accessed
on the internet.
Over the internet. That's not a Doctor Who problem. That's every TV show problem.
Yeah.
That always drives me a little nuts.
As far back as the X-Files, when the internet was a new thing.
Yes. So I've seen some older movies that don't know.
By the way, when we have the reveal about the Dalek controlling Lynn, they mention the word puppet, and they also, when she asks the Dalek what it is, it says, "I am your pilot." And this is an allusion. They've changed the language a little bit, but this is an allusion to a famous novel called The Puppet Masters by Robert Heinlein, which involves biological creatures that like hang on your back and control you. And they refer to themselves as the writer of the human host.
Interesting.
And so this with puppet and pilot in here, and the fact it's hanging on her back, it really seems like a callback to the Puppet Masters.
Interesting. It kind of, the idea of pilot kind of made me remember Wet Heather from last season, who the girl who got taken over by the water-based spaceship thing. But I felt like it was effective, as you mentioned before, effective body horror in this, because as human beings we are conditioned to not like tentacled things, and so here we have this tentacled thing.
Especially if they're poking the tentacles in and around you. Yes.
I mean, there's a little bit of a allusion to Alien in this, and maybe the classic movie Thing, and some other stuff like that. So I got to say that the Dalek, the reconnaissance Dalek, is effective. I like. Yeah. I mean, that's new, isn't it?
Yeah, the reconnaissance Dalek is new, and that's how they explain, without saying it, that's how they explain why this Dalek can do things and looks a little different than any other Dalek we've seen before on the show. It's because it's not the same kind.
Right, a recon scout Dalek is what the doctor calls it.
By the way, I wanted to mention, while Aaron and Ryan go off to the pub to kind of sort out their relationship, I think that's a nice move here, not only because it's believable for those characters to do that, but it also gives Yaz a chance to play a larger role in the plot and to shine, because all season Yaz has been the one who's kind of like the third wheel as a companion. We've had one episode that really focused on her, and that's it. Otherwise, all the character involvement with the companions, it centers on Graham and Ryan and their relationship, and Yaz is like a spare part. And so here, by taking Ryan out of the picture, Yaz gets to step up, and that was good for her character. Also, I thought this was the first and most dramatic story in terms of the companions and what they got to do, more so than I think previous episodes. It felt like they were much more engaged in driving the plot forward than previously. Right. At least for me, more effectively so. Yeah,
I agree with that. So you mentioned Ryan and his dad going out to the pub or the cafe to chat, and it's kind of funny. Ryan's dad takes the opportunity to try to sell the owner of this pub on this new invention that his friend made, and it was nice that it was. He acknowledges that it comes across as I'm trying to scam the guy, but I'm really not. And there's an interesting little character moment there where. Aaron is not the scam artist. He's not. They could have made it easy and turned it like he's the bad dad who runs away and is a scam artist criminal, but he's not. He's just he worked on oil rigs, and then he stopped doing that, and now he's doing something different, and he's had a hard time dealing with death and loss, and that was interesting. Although I have to say, with this oven, the microwave oven, that's not a microwave oven.
That's also an oven.
That's also an oven.
I assume meaning a thermal oven.
Right. It was Chekhov's oven. As soon as I saw the thing, I'm like, okay, this is how they defeat the Dalek, with this oven. Like, I mean, that was just clear to me. No surprise there. I did like Ryan's line that he says to his dad. There's a lot of like character moments in this scene. They take a lot of time with this. He says, "Don't come back in demanding respect, because that ain't where we are." And I thought that was really good, like, because he kind of sasses his dad a little bit, and deservedly so. And the dad sort of bristles for a second, and then he says, "Well, no, you can't just demand that I respect you because you're my dad, because you haven't earned that respect yet." And I thought that was an interesting and effective character moment.
I like the discussion between Ryan and Aaron, because they both make legitimate points, and I think this is where Chris Chibnall does well in helping the viewer understand a situation from more than one point of view on the part of the characters. Because Ryan is initially saying, I don't care how it's been for you, and Aaron starts with this. Well, when you're older, you see things, you sometimes have to do things, and it's not the ideal. And Ryan, which is true, as an adult, things don't always work out the way they should, and that's part of life. But Ryan then doesn't accept that and says, well, you run because you're too ashamed to make it right. And he tells him, you hid. And he says, well, I'm not hiding anymore. And so, that interplay of the two viewpoints, I think, is a nice thing that is authentically human, and something I think Chris Chibnall can do well when he wants to. He
does, yes. I mean, that feels like a real relationship. I mean, it's not flat. It's. I mean, I felt, my life experience mirrors, but there's some similarities. My dad and my parents divorced when I was younger, and I felt like my dad wasn't there for a lot of my childhood, and we've since reconciled a lot. But there's a lot of this, like, my dad wasn't a bad guy. He made mistakes, and I could have done more, and but the point is we're older now and we can be better now, and that's that seems like what Chibnall is trying to do here in this scene, and I like that from my perspective.
And it didn't come across as flat. Yeah. By the way, speaking of other things that are not flat, those giant carrot crystals in the TARDIS control room, I don't know that they've shown them in exactly the way they did in this episode, but I found it really distracting and unpleasant that the tops of the giant crystal carrot pillars bend up and down as the central TARDIS console pillar goes up and down. It's like that effect totally did not work for me.
It looked fake. It looked like a prop. That didn't work. They need to get rid of that. It was weird. See, the Dalek manages to disable the TARDIS somehow, which increases the drama. That's the Doctor can't just appear next to Lynn and take out the Dalek. They have to track her via CCTV and other things and satellite, and there's all this tension. She communicates
really nice car chase sequence.
Yes, yep, with the police, and a scary. Although when that female police officer gets out of the car and sees Lynn approaching her with the tentacles, I was thinking to myself right now, and I'm sorry, this is going to be a little bit of maybe a little political and bring up some bit. I'm like, I bet she really wishes she had a gun right now.
Well, don't we all?
I'm sorry, but that's that's I'm an American. That's how I think.
Yeah. I thought the car chase sequence, and I'm not a fan of car chase sequences because typically, and I saw too many of them in 1970s television,
chips,
where they were used as a way of just filling time. Yes. So whenever you have a car chase, nothing is going to advance the plot until the car chase is over.
Right.
But this I thought worked well. I thought it had an intense, very modern feel to it. I liked it. I thought the tentacles, when she gets out of the car, the tentacles coming out of her back are really creepy. And then something that they don't make a point of, we just see it. But when Lynn drives off in the police car, we see the two officers laying face down, dead, on the side of the road. And the female officer has her hands tied behind her back. It's like, what on earth happened here?
Right.
I mean, that is really creepy, scary, like murder crime scene stuff.
Yeah. That was, and that's the thing is, it's like sometimes you complain like they didn't give us information, they didn't show instead of just assuming. But this sometimes it's more effective to.
This is less is more.
Yeah, where like some things are left to the imagination, like what happened. So that was effective. Lynn drives off to this company, MDZ, that they didn't really establish this, but they apparently have acquired the pieces of the Recon Daleks shell that had been uncovered in the archaeological expedition, including the weapons. And so she goes.
They're like a defense contractor.
Right, and they're trying to research how to harvest the technology. They show up there. She kills the guard, this dopey guard who basically admits like, hey, if you really want to get in, kill me and use my dead hand to open up the door. But TV trope number 2, all locks can be broken if you whack them hard enough. So that happens.
By the way, we have the doctor tries at one point to call Kate Stewart of UNIT.
Yes, yeah.
And we're told that they're currently suspended because there's an investigation involved over financial scandals and stuff. And it's like, yes, bureaucracy in action, even in the Hooniverse. So
I love that. Like, what was there? She was call center Polly at the UK security helpline, which I love that there's a helpline. But the way she talks, it's totally that call center person cadence and the way of talking, and kind of bored, doesn't necessarily believe anything that you're saying. And that bit was I really like that.
I just am amazed that she has. I mean, it's part of the joke, but that she even has access to information about UNIT. Right. I mean, they are kind of public at this point, but still, it's a little surprising. It's also.
Didn't she? I think she looked up UNIT on Wikipedia. I think that was a Wikipedia page.
Oh, I missed that. Okay. It's nice. I thought it was a very nicely done sequence, because one of the natural questions that is going to occur to the viewer, a longtime viewer, is, why doesn't the doctor try to call in UNIT to deal with this problem?
Right.
And so they need, in order for that not to diffuse things or overly complicate the story, they need to take UNIT off the table.
Yes.
And this was a creative, fun way of taking UNIT off the table and dealing with that question.
Right. I'm glad they didn't just leave it as a loophole or a plot hole.
But by the way, it's also approximately in this part of the episode where we get the title drop. The doctor says, "Here's my New Year's resolution. I'm coming for you, Dalek. Lynn, hold on."
Right. We have the doctor she starts posturing a lot when conversing with the Dalek. So we kind of, I mentioned this before, we go back to Graham and Aaron. And Graham, so remember, Graham is Aaron's stepdad because he married Grace, who is Aaron's mother. And Graham plays the role of the good stepdad. He basically bucks up Aaron and says, there's still time to be a good dad and live a good life. I mean, that's the essential message he gives them. And again, I really like that message here that, there's always time to resolve, and if we want to use the term again, the conflicts in our lives. And I thought that was really good. So they track down Lynn and the Dalek to this remote
farm,
metal shop on a farm. Yeah, where I'm not sure why the Dalek chose this particular place, but it did.
I think it was just random. It's looking for equipment, and they have machinery on a farm that it can use to help rebuild its exoskeleton.
Yeah, although there seemed to be a lot of machine shop metalwork sort of stuff there, but so I like the whole like the what is it, the machine shop steampunk Dalek sort of thing, the Dalek made out of rusty metal. Apparently the prop was completely remote controlled at this time. There's nobody inside. Everything was remote control.
Worked better than Chameleon.
Yes. Chameleon the android, which
Companion from Peter Davison's time that totally didn't work.
Yeah, yep. So the Dalek leaves Lynn and leaves her alive. Now, the doctor says, well, the secretions from the Dalek plug the wounds, otherwise that would have killed her. Did the Dalek leave her alive on purpose, or did the Dalek not realize that it would? Because to me, a Dalek would just kill the host and move on.
It's undefined. The real reason is you can't kill the woman.
Exactly. In fact, again, spoilers to the end. None of the major characters dies. Lots of people die in this, but none of the major characters, including Aaron, die in this. Which I thought, the fact that they didn't. We'll get to that. I'll talk about when we get to that. The doctor has a line. She sends them off because she was going to face the Dalek alone. Me and a Dalek. It's personal. It's a very like Clint Eastwood sort of line. One thing interesting about the new, yes,
I like when the doctor gives medicine to help recover from the Dalek thing, and she says, "Don't take it with alcohol; you'll grow an extra head."
She said that was a weird New Year's Eve.
So, also, the Dalek at one point refers to their Dalek time unit of rels, which has come up repeatedly in the past. And the doctor says, "Oh, I must remember how long is a rel."
Yes.
And the answer is based on calculations fans have done from previous on-screen countdowns in rels. It's about 1.2 seconds.
Okay. So it was like Conquest at 9,376 rels. I noticed they replaced the Dalek, the new Dalek design, which who knows if this is permanent, but they replaced the toilet plunger arm with a claw. In this case, which is, and they added missile launchers, which must be a feature of the Recon Dalek that they had there. I thought it was interesting when the Dalek encountered the platoon of soldiers. It gave them a chance to surrender. But I mean, why would a Dalek allow them to surrender? That's
Daleks don't always immediately kill everybody. Sometimes they just want to subjugate them. I mean, they're famous for their tagline "exterminate," but they don't always. That's not always their first option. Okay.
So the Dalek it needs to communicate. It needs to send a message back to the Dalek Empire. And does the Dalek Empire exist at this point in this timeline?
They've never, I mean, presumably it does based on what they've established here. The problem is the Daleks, like the Time Lords, are time travelers, and so they can reach any time period they need for plot purposes. But if they're sending a message, I mean, they could be sending it through time.
Yeah.
But if they're sending one out into the universe today without some kind of time travel thing happening, then it would establish that some version of the Dalek Empire is around right now.
Okay.
Even though they could be native to the far past or the far future, they may have a colony here in our time.
Okay.
In fact, they've invaded our time before, so maybe they do.
With the time travelers, if they've ever existed, they will always exist. That's sort of a necessity of that. So it heads to GCHQ, which is a real thing in Britain. It's government communications headquarters.
I didn't know that. I thought it was a joke. You'd actually have this government communications headquarters called Government Communications Headquarters.
Yes, it's actually on Hubble Road in Cheltenham.
Wow!
You could Google it. It's real.
Okay.
It looks like the Apple headquarters, which it does. That's what it looks like. And it's a good thing there's a Dalek compatible port at GCHQ, which that was very interesting. It just plugs right in to the port. I have to say, so my wife Melanie was watching with me, and she was like, "Come on, it would take the entire internet down. Would it take the entire?" And I'm like, actually, yeah, you could. I mean, the internet is interconnected. And if you take down the backbone, and in Britain, I'm not sure how many backbones there are. In the U.S., is several. But in Britain, like, you could probably take down the backbone and take down all of the internet.
Yeah, we've had major, here in the United States in recent years, we've had, they would bring it back up quickly, but we've had accidents and cyber attacks and things that have caused, like, if not totally nationwide, at least large area internet outages.
Yeah, yes.
In areas that are larger than Britain.
Right, exactly. So it's plausible. I have to say, like, I mean, I got what you said earlier about the family. We'll have to have a conversation. I felt it was kind of a silly distraction. It kind of like, oh, I guess we'll have to talk to one another. I mean, I don't know. It just seemed.
It was a silly joke, and that's all it was.
It takes up time in an episode with so much action is going on, and they kind of like stop the action to have this silly moment. I don't know, whatever. I like this idea. So they come up with the idea of using Aaron's microwave oven to melt the Dalek. And they can do that because the Dalek is in just regular rusty earth metal. It's not in its special, alien shell. And so, but the Doctor uses the distraction of being the bigger threat. The Dalek views the Doctor as the bigger threat. By she goes one way, everybody else goes the other way. Sees her as the bigger threat, so they can surround it and put this device on it, so they can nucleate it. They can melt it down
with the nuclear oven.
The nuclear oven, like they nuked it. So the one of the things that I saw online, the prop master was writing about this. The melted Dalek was also a practical effect. It was not just CGI. They did all that with LED lighting, which was really interesting. So now, of course, it's the another classic trope of you think the big baddie is dead, but he's really not. And this time it's got Aaron, Ryan's dad. The Doctor tricks the Dalek, goes to a supernova and puts a vacuum tunnel. Was focused on it.
Yeah, I wasn't clear on that. I just they're in orbit around this star, and the Dalek wants to get back to the Dalek Empire, but they go to this supernova and are trying to force the Dalek out of the TARDIS, and it's like the end of the original movie Alien, except the alien is doing more talking this time.
A lot more talking. So it's. But what I got was that the Doctor created a vacuum tunnel sort of focused only on the creature on Aaron's back. And it's sucking it out, but not Aaron. I'm not sure how that worked. But then the tunnel expanded and it was started to suck Aaron out. And so what I thought was Aaron is going to do the dad hero thing and sacrifice his life. I mean, that's what you kind of expect is going to happen. I'm glad they didn't do that. Because it allows Ryan and Aaron to now have a relationship.
At least they're subverting some trope.
Exactly. Yes, I like that trope being subverted. Although, and then Ryan saves his dad. He goes and saves him, and all very nice. There is a bit of the Doctor standing astride the universe shtick again. That temptation to have the I am the Doctor and I am the most powerful creature. Behold me in despair. Sort of thing that we've talked about before. There's a bit of that.
I can forgive that in the case of a Dalek, I think.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, they might earn that by the fact that the rest of the season they didn't do it. It wasn't every episode, and so there's that's good. And so we resolve things by the end.
I like that the Doctor offers Aaron a trip.
Yes.
On the TARDIS. That was nice.
And it seems the Doctor has forgiven Aaron for being a bad dad. And I was going to say it ends with them saying, "Well, where to, Doc? Where are we going now?" And she says, "Well, something like next stop everywhere or something." Everywhere,
yeah,
yeah. So, which kind of cheesy, but in the end, so maybe to sum up a little bit, maybe we can talk about that or some summation of this, because we're going to talk about the season next week, how we feel about the season. But just sort of as a wrap up for the season, this episode, I'm glad we didn't kill off any of the major characters. We're not leaving behind any of the companions. That we're going to get a chance to see these relationships continue to develop, especially perhaps with the case of Ryan and his dad and Graham. That would be nice. But there were no big changes as a result of this, and I did like that way it ended. Yeah,
I had just a few small final notes. One of the things I really liked about this episode, even though they do eventually embiggen the threat, for most of the hour, and this is an hour-long episode, so it's a little longer than normal. For most of the hour, it feels very small and personal.
Yep.
We have these characters we care about with Lynn and Mitch, and they're under threat from the Dalek, and that's enough.
Right.
And so even though I could have done without the let's involve all of Earth stuff. It still, for most of the episode, it felt like a smaller and more powerful story to me than these everything in the universe is on the line stories.
Right.
So that was nice. I also really liked the sequence where they're in Graham's house and they materialize and there's this broken chair on the floor and Graham immediately says, "You broke my chair." And the doctor replies, "Well, if you're going to leave chairs around the place." and then when the doorbell rings, when Aaron shows up, the doctor says, "Is that your intruder alert or mine?" and Ryan says, "It's the doorbell." But the funny thing is, a doorbell is kind of an intruder alert. It's telling you there's someone here who wants in.
As you've seen, Jimmy, when we record podcasts, I have the Ring video doorbell, and when someone rings the bell, my lights flash in here, and then the echo tells me that there's someone at the door. So it is sort of an intruder alert in my house too.
Yeah. I also liked previously, the doctor has done, and this is kind of a writing trope that we see in other places, typically signaling a kind of cluelessness where you don't know somebody's name, and so you refer to them by their relationship. Like if you're on Dobie Gillis and you don't know Dobie Gillis's mom's name, you might say, Dobie's mom.
Dobie's mom, yeah.
And the doctor has done that with like Yaz's mom. So in this one, when Aaron shows up, "Hi, Ryan's dad. You weren't at Grace's funeral."
Yes. That is a classic. The doctor's awkward personality coming to the fore, where she sort of says things that just come straight out of her head. And I know people like that, who appreciate that about the doctor, that they identify with the doctor like that. My sister-in-law really loves this doctor for many of those reasons. One of the things I didn't mention was when the doctor sent Graham to get some peanut butter to grease the geofeudal locks. Which was
geofeudal locks.
Yes.
They've got a little feudal system operating down in the locks.
Apparently. And then they leave.
I want to know who are the lord locks and who are the vassal locks.
Well, actually, I could see an engineer coming up with some terms like that. I'm curious what the peanut butter would do, because it'd be interesting. I liked when Graham comes out and he's like, "They're gone," and Aaron says, "And they took the cabinet with them," like referring to the TARDIS.
The TARDIS.
So that was a very fun moment as well. So there were some really nice lines throughout this episode. So I think that's all we have on this. Before we go, I want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create Secrets of Doctor Who. We've got so many great, wonderful people who support us. Today, I want to thank by name Rick A., Christina T., Jennifer T., Dennis G., and Jeffrey F. We use initials because we don't know if people want to be sometimes they don't want to be identified
by a full name.
By a full name. So, but if your name is Rick, Christina, Jennifer, Dennis, or Jeffrey, assume that we mean you. And but we through their generous donations at sqpn.com/give, they make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows we do at sqpn.com. So if you'd like to join them in their support, please visit sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. What did you think of the New Year's special resolution? you can let us know by visiting sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page and leaving some feedback on the episode link there, or send us an email to doctorwho@sqpn.com. Remember to like the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page, retweet the show on Twitter, leave comments, subscribe. If you're not yet subscribed, subscribe in iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, your favorite podcast app, or on YouTube, where you should hit the bell to make sure you get notifications when a new episode gets posted. And above all, please share the podcast with your friends. Help us grow the community of listeners and to reach more listeners, especially as we go into this period where we're waiting to 2020 to get more new episodes. We're going to be doing some great, fun stuff. In addition to talking about classic Who and rewatching new Who, we get some stuff we're planning for the ancillary materials, the more Big Finish stuff. If you want to get started in Big Finish audiobooks, the Doctor Who audio presentations, we're planning something to help you get started there. So there's so much good stuff coming. So please stay subscribed and, encourage others to subscribe. We really do that. Encourage that. You can find links to all of our personal social media and websites on the show notes at sqpn.com. And like I said, we'll be back next time when we'll be discussing our retrospective look at all of season 11. What do we think of the totality of this season, of the new companions, of the new Doctor, of the new showrunner? Did Chris Chibnall take any of our advice that we offered before the season began? How do we think he did? So until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Doctor Who.
Thank you, Dom. And this is my New Year's resolution. I'm coming for you, Dalek. Lynn, hang on.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, I have tech skills with a Z.
Right. This is going to be fun.